Yet another quarter has come and gone. We've read plenty more books. We've talked about them all a little bit, but now it's time to stack them up against each other. See which ones were the best, see which ones I truly recommend. Sometimes I do my reviews straight after reading a book and I'm writing a high or writing a low. So let's put them all in perspective now that we've had a chance to sit on each of them. The theme, it looks like, for Q3 for me was trying out new things and figuring out where I want to prioritize my reading for the last quarter of the year. We've gone and tried historical fiction, some classic fantasy, some real dark fantasy I had sitting on my shelf. We've tried some Cormac McCarthy and some old classics, some Shirley Jackson Bennett. And we've continued on with some of my favorites. We've found some new favorites. We've found some new ones to avoid. So we'll dive straight into them. Please let me know the best and worst book you read in this last quarter. What would you recommend? While you're down there commenting, make sure you like the video, make sure you subscribe, be part of the fantasy community. We've got lots of fun things going on, but let's dive straight in. We've got historical fiction first up. We've got The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper. Now, if you saw my review for this, you know I absolutely love this book. It goes straight into phenomenal. And I just realized I haven't gone through my ranking names. So for our S tier, phenomenal, absolutely elite, something I truly love and highly recommend. A tier, we've got applause. It's really good. It's really solid. There's just one little thing missing that didn't make it a favorite for me, but I could see it being a favorite for many others. Solid for our B tier. It's a solid book. It's a plus book, but there's room to improve. K, full stop, is our C tier. It passes. It's a book. It's okay, but that's it. It's just like when someone asks you how are you, or someone sent you a message and you do not want to reply to them. K, full stop. Then for our D tier, disappointing. Things I had a negative opinion on. With that, just going back up to Wolf Den and what makes it phenomenal. This is a book looking at people in a bleak situation, someone in slavery working in a brothel in Pompeii. And this book is just beautifully compelling, seeing how they find the light and make the best of their incredibly dark situation. Moving on to another historical fiction, we have our first K of the day already with Essex Dogs by Dan Jones. And this is a book, and it passes as being a book. It's good history. You feel like you are a soldier marching across France, committing war crimes, and that's about it. There's some good character moments, but not enough. There's some okay story moments, but there's just not enough engaging, interesting plot. So Essex Dogs, you get a K. Then we have the second book of the Wolf Den trilogy, The House of the Golden Door. This was a solid book, a very good continuation from the Wolf Den, but it didn't have the exact same cast of characters from the Wolf Den, and the setting was a little bit different, and it just didn't hit the same highs for me as the Wolf Den did, maybe because I'd already experienced it. Then The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Oh, a dystopian, straight to applause. This is a fantastic book, very simply written, but very impactful. Just a father and son trying to survive in a post-apocalyptic world, traveling down a road. Really beautiful, and I will be getting to more McCarthy soon. With that, let's get to some actual fantasy books. So Black Talon and Red Claw by Andy Peliquin. And these are the first two books in his Dragonblood Assassin series. And if you know anything about me, I love Andy Peliquin's writing. He writes easy to read, dark fantasy action series, and this is no exception. He writes this one with another author, Jamie Castle, and in this series, it's basically like an episode of 24. So we're just with our characters all throughout the day. It's just event after event after event. Each book leads into the next, where the story just continues to escalate. We've got two main POVs that we're going back and forth between. They're both assassins, but they start off working for different people on different missions, and their missions get entwined, and it becomes pretty badass. These are both very solid books. They're not elite tier books. They're just simple, fun, dark fantasy assassin stories. Now, we've got something in all the tiers except disappointing. So let's put our first disappointing book in there, which was Kings of the Wild. This could very much be a K as well, just depending on what day it is. Because I read it so long ago, I'd put it in K almost today. But this was a negative book for me. There was no enjoyment, and I was not having a good time reading this. I only read this and continued reading it and finished reading it because it was part of our book club, and I wanted to keep up with you guys. But it is nowhere near as good as our current book club read, We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. This book is truly phenomenal, and I can't wait to tell you guys about it later this month. But Kings of the Wild, it's a D&D inspired story with the world building and just the questing feel, but there was no real stakes. The humor was just too dumbed down and on the nose. And the writing was perfectly fine, the story was perfectly fine, just lack of stakes. Not that funny, too long. Now, coming back to our historical fiction, we had the Gale Song Saga with the Children of Gods and Fighting Men, the Words of Kings and Prophets, and the Land of the Living and the Dead. Now, this series was fantastically written. The characters were elite. The story was really interesting. The first two books in this series go into applause because they were really well done. They were just a little light on the plot. And then book three, which was supposed to be heavy on the plot and went off the rails a little bit. And the character decisions, the wrapping up of the story just came out of nowhere and was unsatisfying at the end and just left too many open ends to allow another series. This should not be called a trilogy. This should just be called the first three books of a bigger whole. So that last little 25% of Land of the Living and the Dead was disappointing, but the rest of the trilogy was fantastic with the writing and the characters. But with that, let's now get into the best reads of the year so far. So we've got the Farseer trilogy. You guys know this became an instant favourite of mine, and what is there to say? Fitz is one of my favourite characters in all of fantasy, barring Gabriel de Leon from The Empire of the Vampire, and because Fitz has done so well, you are invested in every single page. Every single bit of internal conflict and struggle that Fitz goes through, you're invested in, and you just want to see him grow as a person. So I didn't find these books to be slow at all. I guess some people find the plot a little slow, but the character development is the plot, and the plot is constantly moving forwards in that regard. And the plot outside of Fitz's head is also super engaging and intriguing. The politics, the magic, the conflict over the entire lands, absolutely fantastic. I will order these books later. I'll cross the tiers. We'll just put everything in a tier now. Assassin's Quest, one of my favorite books of all time. And then while we're talking about phenomenal books, The Last Argument of Kings, book 3 of the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, absolutely fantastic. I breezed through this one, just really strong, solid fantasy. It's one of the funnest trilogies you will read, and the last book was the best of the trilogy. And you know what? I may put it in phenomenal. It was a really good book. Not the best book I've read this year, but very solid. Now, we'll just get the negativity out of the way with Project Hail Mary and The Haunting of Hill House. Project Hail Mary, I do not know how this is as popular as it is. The guy is just waking up from a nap and doing math for an entire book. The jokes are just horrendous. I could not find this book interesting, to say the least. It's full of poor humor. It's a guy alone in a spaceship trying to save the world, but I didn't find the guy interesting. I found his humor very poor, and he's just going from math problem to math problem. That's not a story. That's just a class in high school. I don't want to do that for a book. Then The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson Bennett. It starts so strong. I can see how it influenced Salem's Lot. The characters, the premise for the story was super intriguing. We've got a haunted house and a professor going to try and prove that things can be haunted and supernatural. He brings people along to test that, and then just nothing interesting happens once they all get to the house. Disappointing read. Now, going to some more fun reads, we had books 3 and 4 of Dungeon Crawler Carl. We had the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook. Things really start to heat up in this book. Things getting really solid. This was just fun, continues on with the greatness of Dungeon Crawler Carl, but things leveled up in book 4, The Gates of the Feral Gods. We'll put that one in applause. Both of these books are just super fun. The series as a whole is fantastic and quickly becoming one of my favorites of all time. You go into this series thinking it's something silly and goofy just for a bit of fun, but with each subsequent book, you realize that is not the truth. This is a deep character book with fantastic dialogue, fantastic character interactions, a direct plot that constantly moves forwards, and then a plot that's under our main plot with a ton of political intrigue and just a ton of mystery going on. You have to check the series out. And I was blessed to spend quite a bit of time in Westeros in this last quarter. I read The Knight of the Seven Kingdoms for the first time. This was a really fun read. Just getting a story in Westeros when the lands weren't at war. Yes, there was still a ton of conflict and unrest across the lands, but there was no big battles. So I felt like the stakes were a little bit lower, and we got to spend some fun time with our characters, who were both fantastic. Dunk and Egg, their character dynamic is just as good as Carl's and Donuts. And these 3 short stories were just really fun. Then A Game of Thrones, book 1 of A Song of Ice and Fire. Where else can it be but phenomenal? You guys know about this one already. I don't need to tell you about it. Then we had books 2 and 3 of A Vengeful Realm by Tim Fasciola, and these books were perfectly fine. I DNF'd This Is the End, book 3. as it just felt like more of the same. This is good political fantasy. This is good world building, a very Roman-inspired world. The gods messing with the worlds of the humans. We've got a chosen one trying to free the slaves. Everything is going on there. It's good. It's just I just didn't feel like reading it anymore. Just wasn't really compelled. So we'll just put these in the K. But they are really well written books if you are looking for political fantasy, Roman inspired fantasy, some good action. Now I've just got The Lies of a Jungo. Now this is just a novella, part of a 3 novella series from the Forever Desert, I believe it's called. And yeah, this one was really well done. It felt kind of like a parable, kind of like you're reading The Alchemist, where there's a deeper message to the story and the story's not exactly fleshed out and it doesn't all make sense, so that the message can get across a bit clearer. Just going into communication and long-held beliefs and who can you trust. All really interesting things to think about. It's a series I'll definitely be continuing. That leaves one last series, The Five Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee, a series that took over my TBR a month ago. I just read through them back to back to back, absolutely fell in love. Book one, The Forgetting Moon, was very solid. I had a fantastic time with it. There was just a few issues I had with some of the characters. Just some of the creepiness of the characters was just a little bit too much on screen. But The Blackest Heart absolutely fixed all of that. It was the best book of the series, truly phenomenal. And The Lonesome Crown was a really solid finish to the series. My only complaint was just the last battle was just a little bit too long. It took me a couple of days to read, which at the pace I was reading when I read that shouldn't have been the case. But this really was a top 10 series of all time for me. We'll have to see if it's still there when I redo my top 10 video in January. But for now, we've got our tiers sorted out. So now we're just going to have to dive into what were the best. So I think Assassin's Quest has to be number one. The Blackest Heart will put it number two, with Royal Assassin as a close number three. Then before we go, Last Argument of Kings. And then we'll go Game of Thrones before we put Wolf Den right at the end. I really like that. That's a very solid, phenomenal tier. Going for our tier two, I think we have to go with The Lonesome Crown at number one, with The Road at number two, followed by Night of the Seven Kingdoms, followed by The Words of Kings and Prophets, then Assassin's Apprentice, then Children of the Fighting Gods and Men, then The Gates of the Feral Gods, book 4 of Dungeon Crawler Carl. Then coming down to the solid tier, just lead off solid tier, I think we'll have to go with The Forgetting Moon, followed by The House of the Golden Door, then The Lies of the Ajungo. And we'll go with The Land of the Living and the Dead, followed by Dungeon Crawler Carl 3. Lastly, Red Claw, then Black Talon, books 2, then 1 of the Dragonblood Assassin series, respectively. Ranking our K tier, Essex, that seems fair. And then ranking our disappointing tier, I think we'll have to go Haunting of Hill House, Kings of the Wild, Project Hail Mary being the most disappointing of the year. Now, I understand they are 3 very popular books that I put in my disappointing tier, and that may have led to my disappointment, just how highly rated these books came to me and how they just did not live up to that hype at all. So that's my rankings. If you don't like it, just let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this whole video. Make sure you like it, make sure you subscribe, and guys, I'll see you next time. Have a great day.